Okay, good day. Today we are looking at sequencing activities, and we'll also be looking at Microsoft projects. Okay, the things that we have to cover today is sequence project activity, explain project schedule network diagram, describe the tools and tech to estimate activity resources, describe the 3-point estimate and the PET analysis and the Monte Carlo simulation. Then we'll also be looking at the estimate activity duration, after which we'll be taking a look at Microsoft project. Now, moving further, this is the process of sequence activities, and the input we have a schedule management plan, schedule activity list, activity attribute, milestone list, project scope statements, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. So these are the things that we'll be covering in this particular process of sequence activities. Okay. Now, the precedence diagramming method has to do with activities on nodes. It is a technique used for constructing a schedule model in which activities are represented by nodes or graphically linked by one or more logical relationships to show the sequence in which the activities are to be performed. Now, activities on node is mostly used by project management software such as Microsoft Project. Now, the precedence relationship has to do with the connection between one activity and the other. It is the logical relationship between two activities. It describes the sequence in which activities are should be carried out. Okay. Now, each activity has two open points, start and finish, and the precedence relationship are always assigned to activities based on the sequence, the dependencies of the activities. Example, draw wall installation will finish before painting can begin. Okay. Now, the sequence, the precedence relationship. The precedence relationship, we have 4 types. We have, when I say precedence relationship, the nature of the relationship between one activity or the other and the other. Now, we have 4 types. We have finish to start, finish to finish, start to start, start to finish. Okay. The summary activities, we have summary activities is a group of related activities that for reporting purpose is shown as a single aggregated activity in a bar chart or graph. It may also be called the hammock activity. What are we talking about? For example, in a construction project, you can have maybe an activity called foundation complete. That foundation complete is a summary activity that has several other activities that make up that foundation complete. Now, for reporting purpose, you can now, with that activity, you can determine how long it took to complete foundation and what it costs to actually complete the foundation of that building. Now, conditional diagramming method. Activity sequencing must be revisited or repeated. That must be revisited or repeated are called loops. Okay, which activities that can be implemented only under specific conditions are called conditional branches. So activities that are implemented only under specific conditions are called conditional branches, while the ones that should be repeated are referred to as loop. For instance, we have status meeting or morning briefs. That is known as a loop or a repeated activity. A conditional diagramming method is any network diagram method that allows for non-sequential activity. Okay, now, type of dependencies, or what we call dependency determination. An activity dependency is a logical relationship that exists between two project activities. The relationship indicates whether the start of an activity is contingent upon an event or input from outside the activity. Now we have the mandatory dependency. Mandatory dependency is a type of dependency that tells you that this thing must happen before the other one. Now, it is not as a result of discussion or what you think or how the organization wants it to be. No, rather, it is a type of dependency that tells you, according to the nature of the job, this is what you must do. Okay. For instance, For you to start laying blocks, the concrete has to dry. Then you can start laying blocks. If you don't do that, it will have problems. So it is not at your discretion or the nature of how the organization does work or the custom of that organization. No, but it is as a result of the nature of the job, the nature of the work at hand. Okay. Now, discretionary dependency, it depends on what you want or what your organization wants or the culture of your organization, how things are done in that organization. Okay. Now, when you do things according to how things are done in your organization, we refer to it as discretionary dependencies. Now, we have external dependencies and internal dependencies as well. Now, external dependencies are those activity depending on an external activity. For instance, when you're waiting for an auditor or an audit, to take place, okay, that we refer to as an external dependency. There are also things that are internal to the organization that you have to depend on, internal to the project that you have to depend on. That is known as internal dependencies. Now we have leads and lags. Leads is a jump ahead time. It's the amount of time whereby a successful activity can be advanced with respect to predecessor activity. Now, let me explain that. The leads that we are talking about here, when an activity is supposed to be done sequentially, whereby one finishes before another one starts. But instead of you waiting for the first one to finish, you started the second one before time. When you do that, you are jumping ahead of time. It is known as a lead. While lag is the direct opposite of a lead, is a mandatory waiting time. It is the amount of time whereby a successful activity will be delayed with respect to a predecessor's activity. Okay. Now, for instance, after you've done you pour the concrete, you have to wait for it to dry before you lay the blocks. Now, you can wait for, let's say, 2 days. That 2 days is known as a lag. It's a mandatory waiting time. Now, this is a network diagram and how it looks like. Now, what we have here, this where you have label A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth. They are the nodes that represent the activities, while the relationship is the connection that you see with those arrows around them. Okay. Now, let's go further. So this is what we'll be doing when we are doing the Microsoft project. Okay, guideline to sequence project activity, review the schedule management plan for information on the schedule model, methods, and tools and information on how the activities will be sequenced. Determine the dependencies among project activities by using your activity list and product description. Identify predecessors and successors activity by reviewing the activity attributes for each activity. Then review the milestone list for detail for specific schedule, milestone event, and so on and so forth. You can read that later. Now, the next we have is estimate activity resources. It's another process. Now, activity resources refer to any useful material or any individual needed for the project work to be complete. Our project resources vary greatly in size, cost, and function. So we have a human resource, we have labor, okay, which is part of human resource. Then you have material resource and other resources. So categories of project resources, we have labor, which has to do with human resource. Then we have material and supply, we have facilities, equipment, consultants, services, utilities. They are all referred to as resources. So the process, we have the input, tools, and tech and output. Input, you have the schedule management plan, activities, activity attribute, resource calendar, resource risk register, activity cost estimate, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. Some of these things have already been treated, and things like risk register will be treated in a further video, while some of them that have not been treated and are relevant for this process will be handled here. Okay, now the tools and tech, we have expert judgment, alternative analysis, published estimated data, bottom-up estimate, and project management software. Then output at the end of the day, we'll have activity resource requirement, resource breakdown structure, project document updates, and so on and so forth. Now, for resource calendar, it includes availability of resources for each activity and is used to estimate resource utilization. A composite calendar list additional information such as available list of resources and the scale and compatibility of human resources. Now we have published estimated data. It is the data that professional organizations regularly publish to consolidate production rates, cost, and more for many resources for different countries and specific locations within countries. The data can be used as a reference for activity estimation. At the bottom-up estimate, okay, it is used to decompose work in an activity to the least executable level and generate activity resource estimate by adding the resource required by each activity. Now, the accuracy of the estimates received by using this technique is generally high. Now, what are we talking about? We have an activity, you break it down and keep breaking it down until you are able to determine the resources that you need to execute each bit of that particular task. Okay, now we have the project management software. It helps plan, organize and manage project resources and develop resource estimates for activities. Example is Microsoft Project. Okay, now activity resource requirements, they have resource breakdown structure and project document update. Now, the activity resource requirement, it determines the type and quantity of resources that are needed for each project activity. Now, for resource breakdown structure, it represents the hierarchical resources, including their categories and types. Now, for project document update, project documents may be updated, which may be updated includes activities, and resource calendar. So we have activity resource requirements, the type and the quantity of resources needed. Now you need to break them down using what we call resource breakdown structure to tell us their categories and the type, and so on and so forth. Now we document those projects document. We update the project document that needs to be updated. Now, guideline to estimate activity resources, you have the schedule management plan for the level of accuracy and units of level for the resource needed to be estimated. You have to review the activity list and attribute for all their project activity that needs to be estimated. Check the resource calendar when resources are available. Review the risk register to consider any risks that may impact resource estimation. Review the activity cost estimate for the cost information. Use tools and techniques to determine the good resource estimate for each activity. Document the activity estimate in activity resource requirement and the resource breakdown structure. Okay, this is a scenario question which we will skip. Now, process to determine activity duration. After you have estimated the activities, you need to now determine the duration. Okay, now the input we have is we have the schedule management plan. We have schedule management plan. We have activity list, activity attribute, activity resource requirement, resource calendar, project scope statement, risk register, and resource breakdown structure, enterprise and environmental factors, and organizational process assets. The tools and the tech, we have the expert judgment, analysis estimating, parametric estimating, 3-point estimate, group decision making technique. We have the resource revised analysis. Then the output at the end of the day, you have activity duration estimate and project document updates. Okay, so analogous estimates. What are we talking about? It is a kind of estimate that uses historical data from similar project to estimate duration for the current project. Okay, parameters such as activity duration and cost from actual result of similar activities on completed project helps generate good estimate for new activities. Now, what are we talking about? For instance, if you are a builder, you are a developer, you build houses. Okay. Now, say you built a duplex for somebody, or a 5-bedroom duplex for somebody, and you want to do similar kind of work, which is a 5-bedroom duplex for another person. You just give the person estimate based on the previous house that you built, the data from the previous house that you built. Use that to estimate. Okay. Normally, it is more of a 50-50 thing because there may be market condition and other factors that may lead to your data being wrong for the new project. Okay. Now, A parametric estimate, on the other hand, it uses an algorithm to calculate duration, budget, or cost based on historical data and project parameters. Now, if you have used people like painters in your house or apartment, you've used painters, maybe landscapers, and so on and so forth. Now, when they come into a place, they can just look up and look down and tell you the price that they will charge you for a work, a job. Now you will be wondering, where did they get the information they are looking at? It's possible that the top of the building was done using ceiling. So they just counted the number of ceilings that you have and they'll come up with a budget. Now some of them will just take a walk from one end of the room to the other end, in their mind, calculating the meter, calculating the length of that place. Now, if they are able to do that, they can give you an estimate. Okay, so they have used an algorithm to calculate the duration and be able to budget or cost that particular work. When you do that, you use what we call parametric estimating. Now we have the 3-point estimate where you use most likely, the optimistic, and the pessimistic. Now, what are we talking about here? For the most likely, you were looking at the best possible scenario. Okay, so we bring up a figure for the best possible scenario. Now we look at the optimistic estimate, sorry. The most likely, not the best possible scenario. The most likely talks about looking at events, looking at things, the way things are, what is most likely going to be. Okay, for the optimistic, we are looking at the best possible scenario. Okay, while the pessimistic, we are looking at worst case scenario. So you give those things figures and you use them to do your estimating. Now the formula we have: optimistic time times plus 4 times most likely, then plus pessimistic divided by 6. Okay, this concept is from the program evaluation and review technique. Tools and tech, we have the group decision-making technique. We have the reserve analysis. The group decision-making technique includes techniques such as brainstorming and the Dorfer technique to assist teams in making decisions about activity duration estimate. Okay, when we talk about where you have a group making a decision, okay, that's what the group decision-making technique is. Now, we have the reserve analysis. The reserve analysis, it looks at adding some contingency reserve time in a project schedule to account for uncertainty. Okay, now when you use terms like plus or minus 2 weeks, you are actually doing reserve analysis. Okay, now for Dorfer technique on the group decision making technique, you have okay, we all know what brainstorming is. Dorfer technique, where a group people, they anonymously give you information about what they believe should be something, and with that you make a decision. Now we also have what we call the Monte Carlo simulation. It is a computerized statistical probability analysis software application for project managers to account for risk in quantitative analysis and decision making. This simulation provides a range of possible outcomes and the probability that they may occur for any choice of action, with all possible consequences for middle of the road decision. Okay. Now, after at the end of the day, we have activity duration estimate and project document update. Now, for activity duration estimate, they are the likely number of time period that are needed to complete an activity. Okay, they do not include any labs or any leaks. They can be represented by a range such as weeks, 4 weeks plus or minus 4 days, or by 10% probability of exceeding 4 weeks. Okay. So for project document update, we have new activity attributes and assumptions may be added as a result of activity, as a result of duration estimation. Okay. Elapsed time and effort. Elapsed time, it is actual calendar time required for an activity from start to finish. So how long will this activity take? That's what the elapsed time talks about. effort, it is the number of person hours or person days required to complete for completion of an activity. For instance, to paint this house, I can tell you that it is a one-man job and it's going to take 4 days to do. Okay, so when I say that, I'm actually stating effort. Okay, now guideline involve the work package owners or others who are very familiar with the work of the activity. So involve people that are knowledgeable. That's what we are talking about, or people that will be doing the work when you are trying to estimate the duration of that activity. Now, consult historical information, review this schedule management plan to determine the appropriate estimation method to use and the level of accuracy needed to estimate activity duration. Now, determine how you want to quantify the work that needs to be done. Now, review the resource requirement and capabilities and check resource calendars. Now, review the project scope statement, risk register, resource breakdown structure. Use tools and tech to determine the good duration estimate for each activities. Okay, this is scenario question. Okay, so we come to an end of this particular lesson. Okay, so let me end this particular sharing so that I can bring up Microsoft project. Okay, now this is what Microsoft project looks like. Okay, now I just brought it up. This is Microsoft project 2016. So I'll pick up a blank project. So this is the ribbon, this is the toolbar down here. This one is my zoom here. Okay, and this is the table, and this is where my Gantt chart will be. Okay, so as we go, I won't really take much time here. I just want to start a project, and so that we can actually kick off. Let me see. Sorry, let me minimize this a little bit. Okay. Let me new projects. Sorry. Uh-oh, I made a mistake. Okay, so let me go back to my project. Okay, I'll go to project information. Project, this is when it's starting. Okay, this is the start date, this is the schedule, this is the current date. I'm just trying to check a project before the statistics. There's nothing there for now. Okay. Okay. That's project information. I was actually looking for something. Take me to okay, let's save this. That one day. I wanted to just do it directly while the system is still taken. So I'll save it into my desktop. So I'll call it. I'll call it. This project will be titled innovation of staff residents. So I'll save this. Okay, so I have my project saved. So I'll start with, there are 2 categories now. for this project, I have external renovation and internal renovation. So I'll start with external renovation. Okay, and then I can come down here and put my internal renovation. Okay, so underneath my external, I have clearing and landscaping. Clearing and landscaping. Okay, then I have tiling. Tiling and flower. And flower. Planting. Okay. Okay, I have brickwork. If there are, I'm just titling it brickwork. Then we have brickwork and brickwork and what's that called? Grading. Okay. Then we have painting. Okay. So each of these things are under what we call they are under external renovation. So I'll need to take them in. I'll come here and push this, just indent it. Take this indent it inside. Okay, this indent this. This indent this. Where's my painting? Okay, I invented all this. Now, if I want to add a tax underneath, I just right click and say insert tax for me. Okay. I think I'd like to move this also. Pick it up, place it here. I know that. So I'll come here and type plumbing. Maybe plumbing and what now? Okay, let's just say plumbing. Okay, plumbing. Okay, so this is my external renovation. So I'll come and give these things durations. Let's say this one, clearing and landscape, take me, let's make this is days. Duration I can choose. Okay. This is days. Let's say we have clearing and landscaping. It takes us 4 days. Tiling and tiling and flower and flower planting will take us 4 days. Okay. Now plumbing will take us 2 days. Brickwork and grading takes us, let's say 5 days. Then if you notice, the more I add duration, the more this one increases. But the problem I have is they all start on the same date and finish on, okay, this one finish 1 day extra. So the highest number of days I have here is when this one is finished. But that's because I have not added relationship to this task. So painting will take me, let's say, 3 days. So now I add relationship to them. When this one finishes, this one starts. You see, this one automatically jumps to 8 days. Why? This plus this will give you 8. Okay. Now when this one finishes, this one will start. It jumps at 10 days. So I have 8 plus 2, 10. When this one finishes. Okay, let's see. Plumbing, flowering and plumbing. This one we can choose a start to start. Let me first of all pick this and adjust what we have here. I'll double clicking and picking start to start. Okay. So if I do that, it pulls this back to 5 days. It pulls this back. Since this can start when this one starting, and this one has more duration than this, so we calculate this plus this, not this one. I don't know if you understand. I said this plus this, okay, that gives you 8, plus this, that gives you 13. That's why we're having 13 on the summary tax. Now look at this. This one is starting, this one starts when this one starts. Now, but this one has 5 days. Since it has 5 days, it overrules these 2 days. That's what we have here. Okay, so after this, we can now kick off painting. Okay, so we now have 16 days for this summary task. So we can also do that for the internal, we can do that for the internal renovation. Now for the student, I want to give you an assignment at this point. Now the assignment I will give to you is, having done my external renovation, I would like you to fill up 7 tasks in the internal renovation. When you do that, you do a Gantt chart for them and do relationship for them and be able to utilize the 4 types of relationship that was mentioned. When I say the 4 types, I mean the start to start, the start to finish, the finish to finish, and the finish to start. Okay, the start to start, start to finish, finish to finish, and finish to start. Use the 4 relationships that we mentioned in the course to be able, in this course, to be able to tell us when this internal renovation will take place. Now you may need to look at what I've done here and be able to repeat that with me. So that is where we will actually pause on Microsoft project so that we can continue with other things. Thank you. Okay.